Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. Tonight I have a very special interview for you. A researcher and longtime author named Ursula Bielski. She has written what I think is an incredible new book, which I think she said that it would be available in August on Amazon. So ahead of that, she is doing some interviews, which we're very happy to be able to speak to her today. And the book itself is one of those books that I felt like I couldn't put it down. And I think that you will agree with me. The book is called The Devil in Dreamland, Catholic Faith, UFOs, the Occult, and the End. Excuse me. I have here, let me share something before we begin here. She has a sort of website about the book. Scholars and pastors from Christian churches around the world are calling the UFO phenomenon the greatest deception in the history of humankind, except for one church, the Catholic Church. So here is the book, The Devil in Dreamland, Catholic Faith, UFOs, Occultism, and the End of the Supernatural. And I got to tell you, I was incredibly... You guys know how cynical I am. Somebody's got a new book or whatever. But this book was different to me. Everyone here knows that I'm an incredible student of history. And Miss Bielski goes through essentially the entire history of sort of occult and New Age and the UFO phenomenon and the intersections between them. The book covers spiritualism, Collins Elite, George Van Tassel, George Adamski, and the early contactees. Valiant Thor is included, Frank Stranges, Gray Barker, and the Men in Black. There's a section about Ed and Lorraine Warren, who you may know inspired the Conjuring series. There's a section on Billy Meyer, Malachi Martin, and demon possession. Indrid Cold. There's a whole lot on alien abductions, Betty and Barney Hill, and more. Michael Heiser with Fallen Angels and the Nephilim. It is, I think it's one of the best books, especially for somebody who may not have read 100 different books about UFOs and aliens and these strange and esoteric topics, because this book is a history of so many things. And like I said, the intersections between them and spirituality and spiritual movements and Christianity. I think it's well worth a read. And I would highly suggest that you pick up this book next month when it comes out. Forget about Lou Elizondo's book. You're not going to learn much from that. And also, it was interesting to see somebody sort of explain a lot of the Christian perspective about a lot of these things and the intersection between the occult and things like UFOs and aliens and the paranormal. So we have Miss Bielski here. Welcome, Miss Bielski. Welcome.
Thank you so much. That was so nice of you to say that, and it means a lot to me because
I'm kind of hard to impress with the book.
Yeah, well, I know how much you are into history and how much research you do. So I knew, to impress you, I knew it had to be pretty good.
Yeah, it wasn't what I was expecting, though. To be honest, I think I expected like a preachy book about like UFOs and aliens, stay away from them, they're demons. That's kind of what I expected. But then I started reading and I was just blown away, because it's like every great story that I have read about from aliens and UFOs for the past however many years, it seems to be all there. And you have sort of crafted this book that has the whole history of all these intersections. And I particularly enjoyed the Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley section, because those guys were up to some weird spell casting, and the part about Parsons sort of manifesting his perfect mate with Aleister Crowley doing magic to find her. It was very well done. Can we talk a little bit about that intersection between the occult and UFOs and aliens. What has been your perspective? Because they seem to intermingle so much, right?
They do. And we were chatting a little bit before the show started. And what really impressed me, I am not a ufologist. I started getting into UFOs 5 years ago, when I got out of the occult. So I have been a paranormal investigator for my entire life, but I mean a professional one. I've written 12 books. I live in Chicago. I'm like the ghost lady in Chicago, right? I've written all of these books about haunted
You're
Chicago.
that weird ghost lady, yeah.
Yeah, the ghost lady. I ran the ghost tours in Chicago for 20 years, all that stuff. And when I went to grad school, I studied 19th century religious history. And a lot of it was fringe religions like theosophy and then into the UFO cults and stuff like that in the 20th century. So I wasn't unfamiliar with this, but that was not what I've been doing, in my life for the last 4 decades, right? So I got it, I was a paranormal investigator. I would go out and investigate people's houses I did that for decades. Wrote these books. I did all this kind of research at haunted places. And then, with the dawn of, the 21st century, with the explosion of ghost hunting and all the shows and all of that stuff, that whole thing, which nobody was into before, when I was into it in like, the 80s, when I got into it. Um, it took this very occult turn where these, ghost hunters and then later ghost adventures, most haunted in England before that, these were very occult things that they were doing. So, they were the main goal, the end game for all of these ghost shows is real-time two-way communication with the dead. And that was nothing like I had ever done when I started out doing paranormal investigation, which was when I was an undergrad actually at Benedictine University, a Catholic university here in Illinois, outside of Chicago. I was studying history, but I happened to meet a guy who was studying psychology. And I don't know how this happened, but our Catholic school was allowing him to do most of his work in parapsychology, which I didn't even know was a thing, at that time. But he taught me all about parapsychology. I became his research assistant. I started helping him with his field work and actually testing people for like ESP and stuff like that. So it was very academic, and scholarly and secular, when we were doing all of this stuff for decades. But with the advent of the whole ghost hunting thing, that all became very occult. And I just got sucked into it because I had to, because that's what people wanted. And so when I would go and speak about, ghosts and hauntings, people wanted to know like, oh, do you use those those machines? Do you use the spirit radios? Do you use
talk box?
do you use EMF meters? All that stuff, right? They want all the things. So I learned how to do it and I started to do it and I got really good at it, especially EVP, which I talk a lot about in the book, as you may have gotten to that part. And so it was kind of amazing to me. I got really into this and I got into a very bad place about 5 years ago. And, I had gone through all the levels of, like up to demonic possession where, it starts out with like obsession where you get obsessed with stuff. I would get obsessed with ghost hunting. There were certain places, haunted places that I got obsessed with. Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. It's a huge one. Joliet Prison. And there are places like this where people will sometimes they become obsessed with them and their lives just take a turn for the worst and they end up losing everything, their health, their job, their spouses or families. You see it all through the history of it. And that a lot of that started happening to me. And I decided I was going to leave that occult part of what I do behind. And it was a huge decision because I knew it meant like mostly the end of my career, was what I was doing. And it was at that time that I got an email from MUFON, a MUFON group, for an online seminar. This was during the pandemic. It was an online seminar one weekend on UFOs. And I was like, oh, UFOs, harmless, it's not like an occult thing.
Oh
So
no, and then you fell in the
really
rabbit hole,
excited.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's really excited. I'm gonna go to the UFO seminar. So I signed up. I had my coffee there at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. And literally after 2 presentations, I was like, this is more occult than like anything I have ever experienced, like in my entire career as a paranormal investigator. And I went down the hole, like everybody does. And I started to see, all those cases and all those people that you rattled off in the beginning, like Frank Stranges and Billy Meyer and Valiant Thor and Indrid Cold and, just all the people. I started to read all the literature. I started to read the original literature, from all the contactees and all of that. And every single one, it was just shot through with occult stuff, like every single
I
thing.
agree. Yeah, I agree.
Where every new topic I was looking at, like I knew there was gonna be something. And if I didn't see it right away, I kept reading. And then there it was. Like a good example was with Frank Strange's, Valiant Thor, and everyone's just like, oh, it's so stupid,
It's so
like
cheesy.
it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
dumb, right? So I read his stupid books, and,
Yeah, he wrote like a more. Most people know
so he
Stranger at
wrote
the
one,
Pentagon,
and then
but
Valiant Thor helped him
Valiant
write
Thor
all the
helped
rest
him write
of
the other.
them.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
alien helped him write the other one. I have it.
yeah.
I have that book. Yeah.
So you're like, okay, so this is weird. So either like this Christian guy, like wrote this fake book to try to get Christians into UFOs, or like maybe the government got him to write this book, to get Christians into
Yeah,
UFOs.
yeah.
Or maybe it's like the Collins elite, maybe he's with the Collins elite trying to like get people to like Christians to believe in UFOs, right? So then I kept reading, and lo and behold, and it's really weird because Valiant Thor is a Christian, right? He's a Venusian
Yeah,
Christian.
he's from
So
Venus, but he's a Christian, and
yeah,
and
he's a
and most
Christian.
of see, that's one of the things that I found very suspicious is that Frank Stranges was a Christian minister,
Yeah.
and so somehow he meets an alien that is espousing and repeating back to him very Christian-like ideas and ideals,
Mhm.
but he's supposed to be from another
Yes.
planet. Like this doesn't. It just seems suspicious to me. But I will say
It
this: if
does,
you've
and you're
ever,
just like,
there's videos of Frank Stranges giving talks. He is an
yes.
extremely charismatic, entertaining speaker. He like
Mhm.
sucks you in, and I'm listening to him going, I know this has got to be fake, but this is a great story. He like sneaks past the guard to get into the Pentagon, and like, oh my god, it was so
Yeah,
stupid.
and then when
You know?
Frank is like taken in the car like out into the desert, and then like the alien, like the men in black like come out there, and like the aliens like deflate the tires and like vaporize like the driver of the
Yeah, so he
car.
can't get away. Yeah, it's so
But
stupid.
so I'm
Yeah,
reading. I'm like, I'm gonna read this book. I'm gonna read this book. And there it is. Before Valiant Thor leaves to go back to Venus or whatever, he teaches Frank this ritual. Okay. So he teaches him this ritual called the Ring of Fire, where he lights a candle and like he writes down like all the bad things in the world or something, right? And then he's got to like burn the piece of paper. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like witchcraft or manifesting or whatever, right? And then
yeah.
I'm like, ring of fire. Keeping in mind, I've been hanging around with witches for like, 35 years. So I look it up, Ring of Fire. First thing, Ring of Fire is like an ancient witchcraft ritual. Okay. And it's like
That's
the
interesting.
exact same ritual that Valiant Thor taught to this Christian minister, Frank Stranges. So then I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. Like what, like why would, why would that be in there? So I keep reading. And then I find that Frank Stranges is driving around like Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and he starts to see Valiant Thor like everywhere he goes. And this reminded me and you mentioned me right about Malachi Martin. This reminded me of Malachi Martin's famous book, Hostage to the Devil, where he writes about 5 contemporary exorcisms of Americans. This came out in the early 1970s. Very famous book.
That's an incredible book. It's one of my favorite
And
books.
there is one, and one of my favorite books. One of the cases is about a young man named Jamsey. He's from New York City, and he grows up to become a radio broadcaster. He moves to Los Angeles, and then he gets a job, I think, in San Francisco. And when he's out there, when he's growing up in New York, he has these experiences where he sees like this face. He'll see like this face, like in other people's faces, like in a store window. And it starts to come more and more as his family falls apart. Like his dad turns to like working with prostitutes, like trafficking women in New York. Then he starts dealing heroin. His mom becomes a prostitute because the dad's not bringing any money home. So the family's decaying, and James's like
sad
seeing.
Story, yeah.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So he gets out of there. He moves to Los Angeles, and he's, trying to build up his career as a radio broadcaster. So Jamsey is driving to work one morning, and this being appears in the backseat of his car. And that was exactly where Valiant Thor first appears to Frank Strange's. And I was like, what? And so Jamsey, the story of Jamsey and Hostage to the Devil was Malachi Martin's example of a familiar spirit. This is an example of familiarization and demonic possession. It's a specific kind of possession where a spirit becomes completely attached to a person, but it's like it's not like just the person gets overtaken by the spirit, right? The thing that we all see in the movies, right? And that actually does happen. Like, the person speaks in a different voice and lashes out and has throwing people off of them. The person actually develops a relationship with this demon that has features, physical features. The being creates physical things, and this is a big part of the book too. But, the physicality of UFOs, and I argue that is a spiritual part of it. The physicality is a spiritual part of it. We see physicality with paranormal events all through the history of the paranormal. But at any rate, Jamsey starts to starts to have like poltergeist activity in his house. The faucets turn off and on, the doors slam. His car starts up by itself. But then at the studio, he starts to see messages pinned on the message board at work. While he's on the air, he sees these messages appear on pieces of paper on the bulletin board. And they're messages from this demon who
I remember this from the book.
Uncle Ponto.
That's pretty creepy.
Yeah, Uncle Ponto, the demon.
Demonic messages from a demon on the message board.
Yeah, and everyone sees them. Everyone sees them, but they think Jamsey is writing them. And Jamsey will go to pick up his dry cleaning, and money will appear on the counter at the dry cleaners to pay for the dry cleaning. Jamsey will go to leave a restaurant, and Uncle Ponto will push the revolving door in front of him for him to go out. So it's very physical. It's very spiritual. And it reminded me exactly of what was going on with Frank Strange's, with Valiant Thor, as well as a lot of those other people. But it's familiarization in demonic possession. And Michael Heiser also pointed that out. I'm sure everybody's seen the film Aliens and Demons that Dr. Heiser was in before he died.
Yeah, I think he was really good at what he did, and I was very sad to hear that he passed away.
I
think he threaded a lot of things together and made things, and he was very good at like explaining some of the biblical principles so that they were more understandable and accessible.
And was totally not a Nephilim believer, like at all, and did not believe that there was any evidence of UFOs when he died. But he said that he believed that he called it direct demonization, and also referred to it as familiarization in the cases of Billy Meyer and George Adamski were the two that he specifically pointed out that he believed that those two gentlemen are. actually demonically
So
possessed.
instead of having alien experiences, they were perhaps experiencing some sort of non-human intelligence, but it wasn't like aliens from another planet. It was some sort of demonic or interdimensional influence, right? I mean, it's a good explanation for what could have
Yeah.
happened to those people. And also, one of the
Yeah,
reasons that I
and
always
you
think
see it, of
demons may
course,
be
in
involved,
all of the
I
well,
always think that
all
demons,
those classic contactees of the 50s, they all fit that model of familiarization and demonic possession, where there is a being that has, it's a humanoid being, it
yeah, and
has
they're hanging out
physical
with them.
characteristics.
Yeah, and they're hanging out with them. One of the reasons that I often thought that demons may be involved in UFOs and aliens because it seems that there's so much deception involved with the people that promote them.
It
I
is the
always thought that
devil,
was,
right? The
yeah, it's
prince
the
of
devil,
lies,
the prince of
right?
lies. So it makes sense that the
Yeah.
prince of lies would employ human deceiving liars to promote these things. It makes a lot of sense. And often,
It is just I say it's infested with lies, and it's like literally infested, but it is infested with lying.
yeah, yeah.
Did you
So it's,
get to I found this so interesting. George Hansen, the great parapsychologist who wrote The Trickster and the Paranormal. I don't know, have you read that book?
oh, I have read that book. I think it's very probably spot
Fantastic
on.
book, just like
Yeah.
a classic. Everyone should
Mhm.
read it. All the viewers, if you haven't read it. But actually got a chance to speak at the same event as George Hansen many years ago in Gettysburg, and he's just like a great guy, and he's so smart. And he investigated the Linda Napolitano case, and it was like he and several other scholars wrote this paper about it, and it was just insane. And I write about this at the end of the book. It was just insane because they met with it was like the international head of MUFON, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, who I met, which I wrote about in the book. It turned out one of my professors was living in the same retirement home as him. So I got to talk to him. But they met in this New York, I think was it Bud Hopkins' apartment in New York, someone's apartment in New York. And they talked about the Napolitano case and the fact that there had been kidnapping twice, attempted murder, and no one had called the police.
Yeah, that's a
And
little
everyone
bizarre,
was like,
right?
no, 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 you can't call the police, And
Well, they would
Hansen
probably
and these
think you're
other scholars,
crazy, I would think. Yeah.
well, the way they put it was that it was like, and it was the early 90s when they wrote this paper. And they came to the conclusion, they said it reminded them of Dungeons and Dragons, where there's this whole history, that all
Mhm.
of these characters and all this history and even like the aliens, like, right? There's all these different characters, this whole taxonomy of these beings from this star system, and these ones look like that from this star system. And everybody has to learn like all
Yeah,
this
it's a
stuff
whole
in order to
mythology.
play the
I call
game.
it, yeah, I call it UFO mythology. It's a whole
Yeah.
mythology that's been built up. And after you spend enough time here, eventually you're familiar with most of the major mythology. You've got the crash retrievals, you've got the early contactees, you've got secret space program nonsense, and it is, and just like you said, you wrote some books that were like folklore. To me, it's like modern folklore. Like people take the story and then they add on to it. Look how many people have added on to the Roswell story or expanded on the Roswell story with their version of,
Yeah.
something, whether it be material, or we have the Roswell rock, the alien autopsy tacked onto it, the Roswell slides, which was a hoax, tacked onto Roswell. It's like people take the mythology and then they expand on it. It's constantly evolving and
Yeah.
expanding. And
And the way that Hansen saw it too was that um, he saw the trickster at work in it, which is essentially the devil, right? It's just a secular way of saying the devil. When you look at that, the trickster in folklore, the trickster in history, I mean, that's just basically what you're saying. And he was saying, it's like that because all of this stuff in ufology happens on the fringe, of society. So nobody that's actually in society can play this game. You have to be on the fringe. But that's how all of the paranormal is. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
when
it's a
you
subculture.
can't,
Yeah.
you don't rarely do see a ghost looking right at it. You see it out of the corner of your eye. You see something move over there. You see something walk by over there. You can't, and once you start looking right at it, like you can't see it anymore. Or when you want to see something, you can't see it, right? And I just found that so fascinating. And when I started to think about that, what they said about everything just being this huge house of cards, and you start to, the famous UFO rabbit hole that everybody goes down, and it's just like, it's crazy making. And then, I realized it's crazy making because every piece of information in this huge puzzle was channeled, right? Given to like
Yeah.
a medium or a psychic or a god, or to, Chris Bledsoe, like in his light things or whatever,
Yeah, the
to,
lady.
these liars, hoaxers, thieves, crazy people, psychics, frauds, you're trying to figure out what happened and what's going on from this stuff, from this information. And none of it is legitimate information. So it's just, yeah, crazy making.
Yeah, I thought we could talk for a minute. You mentioned the physicality of some of these things, but I thought we could talk for a moment about the non-physicality of some of these things. For example, I've been listening to several different sort of Christian perspectives on the UFO phenomenon, and there's a lot of Christians that think it's a great deception and that these demonic entities are just changing what they're appearing as because they can choose a form to appear in. And also some of the characteristics exhibited by UFOs, there can't be a physical driver of these things at the speeds that some people report they're going, or 90-degree turns and things like that. A lot of the Christian ministers seem to think that it's just a deception. We have Aaron Flores, who has one of our viewers, who was saying that the elliptical shape of them is just an elliptical being. Like there's beings in the angelic beings that are described in the Bible as being a wheel in a wheel and things like that. So, but my question to you, because you've been studying this, is why would devils or demons choose to manifest as aliens? Is it just because now we're so technological that they think that would be advantageous to whatever their goals are to influence humanity? Or
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, we saw in the spiritualist movement, which started in 1848, which became such a huge movement. I mean, there were many prominent thinkers of the day that thought that it was going to surpass Christianity as people's like religion, but people didn't think of spiritualism as a religion. They thought about it as scientific. And that was a huge problem. And I read about this in the book, is that, spiritualism was very scientific because it was completely based on bringing forth evidence of the spirit world. And so it was just radically insistent on evidence, like just like science. And so spiritualism really made, at the same time as being that, it also made the occult scientific, right? So by the time you get like J.B. Ryan founding the parapsychology laboratory at Duke University in the 1920s, people accept this, right? They accept all of this stuff that was previously completely forbidden to Christians as scientific. And spiritualism did that. When we think about it now, we think, oh, that was, a reaction. And a lot of scholars have written this, that it was a reaction to the Enlightenment. It was a reaction to science. They were like pushing back at science, but they were not pushing back at science. They were like totally on board with science. But I've lost my train of thought. What was the question?
so I was just talking about the non-physicality and why the demons would choose to manifest as like an alien from another planet. Yeah.
Right. So in the 19th century, So what do you have from in the heyday of spiritualism, where it starts very small, like in the late 1800s, and then it grows throughout the decades that come, and it lasts until like the end of the First World War. You had the American Civil War, you had civil wars all over Europe, and then you have the First World War. So you
Yes,
have
there's a
people,
lot
what
of
are they
people with
looking
dead
for?
relatives. Yeah, they're looking to communicate with their dead
Exactly.
relatives.
And
Yeah,
who's there ready to give them what they want? This
and
what's
just
on
like
the
in the
other
world
side of
of
the sand,
UFOs and
labels.
aliens, there's a lot of charlatans, hoaxers, and fakes and frauds that infected that movement for personal profit. It was extremely popular for many years. There was mediums in every city across America,
Yeah,
several
absolutely.
in bigger cities. Yeah, and people would have these
And
parties
today,
and do these
yeah,
seances, and yeah, that sometimes I look at some of that stuff and I go, I don't know how anybody would believe some of this stuff. Like, oh, there's a knocking. That's got to be the spirits knocking, or the ectoplasm, or some of the stuff. I mean, it seems hokey by today's standards, but I guess at the time people bought it, especially if they
people
wanted
are
to believe.
still buying it. And, you really, when you look at all of this stuff, you start to wonder, are they buying it because there really is something to it? I think there has been a big, skeptical movement also that says like none of this happened and people are just gullible and stupid. Um, but then you start to wonder, like, I don't know, maybe in some of these situations, there were things that happened. There were things that were produced, for example. We have, I write a little bit in the book about some of these spiritualist mediums. I mean, there was one woman, Agnes Guppy Volkman. She was known for producing
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables and flowers on demand. So she would have like 20 people that like showed up at a seance that, she didn't invite them. She didn't know who they were going to be. And they would ask for things like, may I have 5 dried prunes? And like, she would produce 5 dried prunes,
That's a
and she
little
would
hard
do
to
it for every
explain.
single
Yeah.
person, you know?
Yeah. Unless you had
So there was
Confederates that
weird
were
stuff going
plants.
on,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. I mean,
I don't
there's
know,
always an explanation.
yeah, so I don't know. It's some of the stuff is weird. The stuff that happened in the skull experiments in England in the 1990s, a lot of that stuff was weird, and it was produced. This was a seance circle that these people did in the basement in Norfolk in England for years, and it produced what some people think is irrefutable proof of life after death. But the thing about this stuff, and we're talking about the aliens, the ghosts. Why do these entities manifest in these different ways at different times? And absolutely, just to answer your question, first of all, absolutely, now everybody, it's all technology, it's all space, it's AI, it's technology, and of course that's what they're going to be showing themselves as, because that's what people are looking for. People are not looking for their
Kind
dead
of our new
relatives. I
God,
mean, except
technology.
for
Yeah.
Zach Bagans, that's not what real people are into, like real, like normal people, right? That are not like into the supernatural, are not looking for their dead relatives. They're looking for advancement. They're looking for what's out there. They're looking for AI. They're looking for technology. And so that's, yeah, definitely why that has changed. But if you look at, it's just crazy. If you look at the history of spirit communication, for example, and you look at EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, which I was very into. This is under the umbrella of instrumental transcommunication, that's just the generic for using electronics to try and communicate with spirits, right? So I got very into this. A lot of people are very into this. And I found, when I started to get out of the occult, before I got out of the occult, I used to quote a lot of Catholic sources because the Vatican, several popes, and many
Yeah.
Catholic
They're
scientists
they're
were
really into the
behind the promotion
supernatural.
of EVP.
Yeah.
Super
You'd
into
be
EVP.
surprised at
I
how
mean,
many.
Constantine Gaudier.
I had a theology teacher who was like a walking fountain of paranormal and esoteric knowledge. Like, he read several books a week on that kind of stuff. He was really into demonology and could tell you. So I think there is a misconception. I mean, I've known a lot of priests that were like, the paranormal, it's all evil, stay away from it. I grew up Catholic and 12 years of Catholic school and scripture study and theology. But then there are those priests that are sort of renegade that are really into this stuff because, I don't know, in that case, he told me that there's a reality to it. That's what interests him so much. It's connected directly. You can't be religious and not recognize that there's something to some of these paranormal happenings and events, right? I would think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. When you look at those, and again, you had some of the biggest promoters of EVP, spirit communication, Konstantin Raudove. He was a Catholic. Frederick Jurgensen was friends with the Pope. Just on and on and on. There's so many of them that were quoting, and I would quote them all the time, to justify what I was doing with my ghost boxes and all that stuff.
Yeah, but isn't it like a Catholic belief and tradition that you should never try to communicate with the spirits of the dead? And I think a lot of that is a caution because demons will masquerade as spirits of dead relatives and things like that. So, and there's specific Bible verses that warn against speaking to the dead.
Yeah, right? It's weird because, Christians, like non-Catholic Christians, like they're all about like, ghosts are bad, Halloween's bad, all that stuff, right? Catholics are totally different. And I think, it is because of purgatory and the saints, we have these relationships with the dead, right? So like 99% of Catholics, myself included, like I didn't know until I started to learn about this stuff a few years ago. I was just like a normal Catholic, like everybody else. I didn't know that we're not supposed to talk to our dead relatives. We're only supposed to talk to the saints, the people that the church has said are in heaven. We're not supposed to talk to like our mom that died. Like, and that is because the demons masquerade as them. That's exactly why, but nobody knows that. So it's a lot of it is a matter of just not being informed about what we're not supposed to do. But when you look at, I've seen this all through spirit communication. I talked about the skull experiment that was going on in England in the 1990s. Those experiments, when they started to do that, they started to have voices, like direct voice that they would hear, and there would be different characters, right? That had different voices and
which is bizarre.
Names and everything, right? And identify themselves, and they would write things and they would sing songs, and it was all like it was people that had passed away. It was well-known people in like Western culture that had passed away, famous writers and musicians and scientists.
And there's still people that are like, there's people on YouTube right now communicating with Michael Jackson and Prince and, Whitney Houston and other passed away celebrities, which is kind of, I don't know. That bothers me because, like, imagine if that was your family member and there's somebody on YouTube making money pretending to talk to your dead relative. It's just bizarre.
I have a story about that. I'll tell you in a minute. But but with the skull experiment, they started out talking to like people that had died, right? But as the years went by, they started to see in their photographs and their videos, you start to see like alien faces and planets and stars and star systems. So it morphs into that as time goes by, and they start to do it more. They do it more on a regular basis. They get like more of a bond going between the group. The same thing I saw happen in the World ITC.com is or .org. I think it's .com is a website that was founded in part by Mark Macy, who he actually came and spoke at one of our paranormal conferences years ago in Chicago. And he was an atheist. And he became interested in spirit communication because he met some people that were into this stuff. And he got a phone call from Konstantin Raudove, the EVP pioneer, after his death. And then Mark Macy got really into it. And I actually followed what Mark Macy did for many years. And Mark Macy talks on his website about how, like a lot of these researchers, they were getting photographs like video on their TVs, like static TVs. They would see pictures of like John Denver, like on the TV, right, in the static. And they would get these different voices from people who had passed away, friends of theirs that had passed away. I followed Mark Macy for years and like developed my EVP research. And then like I lost kind of track of what he was doing. And then one day, years later, I saw that he had written a new book. So I got the book, and he had gone from, getting messages from people who had died. He had created this entire world of like planets and different names of the planets and different beings that live on these different planets, and all of these messages that he had gotten on like how, we need to change the world and all the ecology, all the same stuff, right? So everyone seems to go from talking to people, human beings who have passed away, and the more that people do it, the more they get into it, slowly over time, these messages and communications start to come from space people.
That's bizarre.
Yeah.
Very bizarre. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So like I said, there's some weird intersection.
Yeah.
This weird intersection between the New Age, and also in your book, you kind of mention and talk about the influence of theosophy on the New Age and the paranormal sort of subcultures. I always say that all roads lead back to Madame Blavatsky and theosophy.
Blavatsky, all of them. Yeah, it's crazy. Emanuel Swedenborg was actually before her, and he said he was taking these mental trips to other planets and seeing like cities on them and things like that. But he never talked about these experiences as experiences of like alien life or UFOs. He felt that they were spiritual experiences. But she was, of course, quite the opposite, where she talked very specifically about these beings from Venus, that these were the ascended masters and these were spirit guides and, all of these different beings, these races of beings. And everything really does lead back to her. And everything leads back to her, because every single New Ager has the roots in her.
They borrow from her heavily, yeah. And what's funny is that there's an awful lot of, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's an awful lot of sort of New Age spiritual guru kind of teachers that are on TikTok and Instagram. And if you really listen to them, they're basically just stealing everything from Madame Blavatsky, like a lot of her philosophy and spiritual enlightenment, the ascended masters, all of that stuff. And it's funny to me to see like 20-year-old young girls, like crystal hippie girls, that are just repeating Madame Blavatsky to a modern audience through technology. And I wonder what she would think about that there's like hundreds of people like basically ripping her off on TikTok and Instagram, and they're gaining huge followings, some of these people, with very unoriginal material.
It's so difficult for me because, this is my world for so many years. I had, ghost conferences every year in Chicago and all kinds of other events. And I just had like dozens of vendors that were, doing crystals and Reiki and psychics and mediums. I still have very good friends that are mediums and psychics. And it's awful because, what do you do? Right. I have come to understand that these friends of mine are being manipulated by these beings, that are using them, lying to them, giving them crappy information. And sure, a lot of people are frauds, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people are not.
But I truly believe that some of these psychics, in fact, I spoke with a former psychic medium who had a Christian sort of awakening and realized that she literally made a deal with the devil to get what she thought were her abilities. But it was really some sort of entity that was feeding her information to give to clients and customers. Mm-hmm. that's what she woke up and realized. And then eventually she began to feel that the entity that was giving her this information was demonic in nature, and wanted something from her. They don't just give you something for nothing. That's like a Faustian deal, I guess she made. And for the longest time, she really thought that she was helping people with their grief and things like that. But then started to realize that this information wasn't coming from good places, and was often wrong,
Yeah, that too. And it's very difficult because people are so good and the legitimate people that are getting this information, they're so good intentioned. They're so sweet, they're so kind, they want so much to help, and I really feel like they're targeted because of this. They do have these personalities that, rarely do you find like the mean, nasty medium. You know what I mean? They're always like the nicest people, right? And I really feel like they're targeted because they do care so much about people. And that's a way that the demonic can manipulate that and turn it to a direction where it can be exploited and used on other people and draw other people into the practice of it and the support of it as well.
Yeah, and in your book, you talk a pretty good deal about alien abduction, and it's interesting to me that some of the characteristics of alien abductions and things people experience used to be experienced from a different sort of lens. Like people would think it was fairy folk or demons or angels that they were, interacting with, thousands of years ago, but now people perceive this same thing as aliens somehow. And have you heard that? It's often a line that I've heard a lot of people talk about this. If you call on Jesus Christ during an alien abduction experience, it stops instantly. I've heard that so many times, but I haven't seen like documented or talked to somebody that's actually said they've done that. But that's an interesting aspect of this that leads me to believe.
The person that actually developed all of that is Joe Jordan. I actually interviewed him
Oh, you're
on my
right.
show earlier this year. And he has written a couple books now. And what he did was, he was like a lapsed Christian when he joined MUFON. And I think he wrote I think he read like UFO Crash at Roswell, like some classic book, and got into ufology, joined MUFON, like quickly became the state director. So he became very involved in it. And he started to see in those cases, the abduction cases, that just like a couple of people had done that, during the abduction experience, they had called out to Jesus and it had stopped for good. Like they never happened again. And
That's
so he
interesting.
started to ask other people, he started to ask other people in MUFON, like, have you ever encountered this? And they're like, actually, yeah, we have. And he's
Wow.
like, okay, well, we should probably like look into that. And they're like, yeah, we can't do that. And he
Yeah.
said that everyone in MUFON said they couldn't look into that or talk about it because it was a religious thing.
Yeah. And it kind of messes with the mindset because, like, imagine for a moment that that's exactly what it is. It's a demonic manifestation taking place. Imagine if that's the reality. And meanwhile, you've got probably millions of people that believe it's aliens from other planets. So it kind of messes with their almost religion,
Yeah, it is.
I would think.
Not almost religion. It's definitely a religion.
Yeah, and there are some strange connections. We have that Aleister Crowley drawing of the lamb that looks like a gray alien. That looks like an alien to me. It doesn't look like, and he said it was an interdimensional being that he somehow summoned and would communicate with. It looks strikingly similar to what most people would think, a gray alien looks like today, or at least similar enough. Right?
Yeah, and in the book, I write about that whole episode with Aleister Crowley summoning Lamb, and then of course, his American pupil, Jack Parsons, who was such an occultist, was
Yeah,
a
the
black
founder of
magician.
JPL Labs. Yeah.
Yeah, summoning demons and building rockets, out in the desert with L. Ron Hubbard. And it's just all crazy, I mean, it's just crazy. And Michael Heiser, I remember him saying that, Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley were goofballs. That's what he called them. And he didn't, he thought the idea that they had any power to summon UFOs is ridiculous. I don't agree with that. I mean, of course, Michael Heiser was an evangelical. I'm a Catholic. I know that these things that rituals and belief and people actually doing these rituals and wanting to have relationships with these beings, it does work, it does summon them, and maybe Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons didn't single-handedly start the UFO movement, but it was that that trend, that momentum, and all of the people that, I mean, look at everything that's come from Aleister Crowley, today. It's just
He's
like,
still
incredibly influential on everyone.
in
And he was a
modern occult
total
circles.
dirtbag, and people love him,
He was a
literally worship
womanizer.
him.
He was a real weirdo, a drug addict. I understand the argument that these people had no real power, though, especially because Aleister Crowley basically died penniless and alone. So I don't know. I remember when I was growing up, Miss Bielski, there was a huge wave of Wiccanism. Do you remember? Like,
Oh, heck yeah.
there was a huge wave. Like, every other girl I met for a while was into Wicca and
Everyone
things
I
like
know
that.
is a Wiccan.
Yeah.
Like everyone.
Oh
I
yeah,
know.
yeah. So that was interesting to me, and you're just getting into girls, and these girls are telling me about, oh, I'm gonna do this summoning and this and that. Like, get away from me, devil girl! You're starting to scare me, But there was a
Well, it's
huge
very
wave of
it's
Wiccanism,
very
and
normal
all those people would read Aleister Crowley books and talk about, oh, that's dark magic. We don't do that because he's summoning
Oh, right,
demons and
because we
things.
do white magic, like there's a thing like that. There isn't any white magic. But yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
But this
that's
lamb
just
thing is interesting. I mean, that looks like a modern day gray, or close enough to a modern day gray. And this was said to be summoned by Aleister Crowley, and he communicated with, and he got messages, and, based a lot of his books and things on these conversations he had with what can only be described as some sort of interdimensional being. But
and there's like
interesting that a
Reddit
demon
boards
would
that are
choose
full
to
of
manifest
people
like
that
this. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. I guess we
there are
expect like
Reddit boards full
horns.
of people that are trying to summon lamb now. Like people are totally into lamb and they want to summon lamb now.
That's
So I mean,
bizarre. I never
there's
heard
a whole
that.
cult around it.
I
Yeah.
never heard that before. That is
Yeah.
bizarro. Weird, right?
People seriously are very strange. Very, very strange. But
People
the
are
Jack
Reddit.
Parsons thing is weird because that whole thing gets into the Collins elite. And that was another thing with I know I mentioned Dr. Heiser a lot in the book, but I just feel like, someone had him on the list of, it might have been MUFON, on the list of the 100 most influential ufologists. And he was not a believer in UFOs, but he looked at everything very,
Well, he
very
certainly had an
closely.
interest, though. He certainly had an
Total
interest.
interest in it. Total
Yeah, but I don't think he believed that
interest
they
in it.
were
He said
aliens
that
from
was
outer
his main
space.
hobby.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think he
But
believed
there
that they
was
were aliens, though.
he said, but he didn't see any evidence yet. That he didn't say there weren't, but he said, I'm open to it, but I don't see any evidence yet that there are any. But he, yeah, he really did not believe in this Christian version, of the deception that is so huge now, that he really started, all of his research into the Nephilim and the Book of Enoch and all of that, started all of it. In fact, Joe Jordan, who we just talked about, when he was on my show, he said it was Michael Heiser, and it was, he didn't say it was Michael Heiser, but I knew it was Michael Heiser, but he said it was David Jacobs, not even Bud Hopkins, but David Jacobs and Michael Heiser's work that led to this explosion of this idea that this is the second days of Noah, where the Nephilim, where the demons are coming down to mate with human women again. They're creating these hybrid beings, a hybrid army to fight in Armageddon with the demons, at the end times.
And meanwhile, you got David Jacobs saying that there's a hybridization program going on.
Yeah.
That's why the aliens are here. So I could see how somebody could, I guess, make that connection, because according to a lot of biblical scholars, the demons will return during the end times.
Right.
The Nephilim or the demons will return to try to, isn't it to try to take as many souls before Armageddon or something like that?
Yeah. And Michael Heiser's work, his theory was that the flood, that God sent the flood because the human bloodline was getting so corrupted with the DNA of these abominable pairings of the fallen angels and the humans. And the only way to wipe out that DNA was to wipe out everyone.
Most of humanity. Yeah. I'm always interested in flood mythology, because something had to happen like that, because there's too many cultures that have the flood myth that were not connected, anywhere near connected or communicating. Different continents, different societies, cultures, religions, but they all have the flood myth, from Asia to Europe, South America, everywhere they have this flood myth. It's crazy. And that's interesting to think, though, that like there was giants or, hybrid demon human creatures walking around with people. A lot of people, people who literally take the Bible literally, they truly believe that all of that really happened, that there were giants, and, but that's where we get some of the myths of, the Titans and other religions, right? Like Zeus would have children with, that's a weird one. It's
interesting because
he would have children with human women. Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't know. And the Catholic Church doesn't have a teaching on whether, that passage in Genesis 6, where the sons of God mated with human women, there are different factions in the church that think different things about that. And the church fathers, there were a lot of different opinion about that. There's not official church teaching in the catechism about that. And so some people believe that, that the fallen angels really did mate with human women, and created these weird offspring. But that's tough too, because angels don't have, sperm or
or
DNA.
Physical form. Yeah.
So
I always would get in trouble when I would get in trouble in religion class asking too many questions about this. Like, well, Father, I don't understand this. These are spiritual beings. How are they mating with physical humans? And he would I've heard various explanations. They took some physical form in order to do it, or they possessed other humans and then mated somehow.
Yeah. Or, some of the church fathers believed that they took, the sperm from a human male and put the sperm into the human woman. And then all of a sudden the human woman is pregnant and she, hasn't been with the guy. And so it's interesting because you see these weird, unexplained pregnancies that like doctors testify to even today, these alien abduction stories, right? But you had church fathers saying like sometimes the angels do this. They take DNA from a man and they put it in a woman, and then all of a sudden the woman is like miraculously pregnant and she thinks it's by an angel because the angel had sex with her. She saw the angel like having sex with her, right? So it's weird. So there's there's no exactly. It's exactly what it is from the mythology of like the church, right? So, or demonology. So so there's no official teaching on it, and I don't even know like if what I think about it after all of these years of thinking about it. I first started reading.
Yeah, me too. I don't know. I don't know what I think about it.
I think I got into UFOs a lot because of Dr. Heiser. So I started reading him too about 5 years ago, and I still don't know, what I think. The other view, the strong view in the Catholic Church, and the more like, mainstream practical view, is that the sons of God were the daughters of Seth, and then the sons, and then the daughters of men were the daughters or the children of Cain. So that
Yeah.
was
So
like,
it's
it
like
was
the
just
Cain and
like, it was
Seth,
like good people
two different
mating with bad
bloodlines.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
two different
So it
bloodlines.
was
That
just,
could be an
yeah, it was just
explanation
people
for
of
it.
God mating with the bad people. So that's a very popular view of it as well in the Catholic Church.
Also, in your book, you do talk a bit about demon possession, and Father Malachi Martin and a few others. That's another weird and interesting rabbit hole. And I've often thought that there might be more evidence for demonic possession than there is for aliens, because we have the Catholic Church was very good at protecting the identities of some of these possessed people, but still documenting some of the strangeness, the signs of demon possession, superhuman strength, knowledge of things that they couldn't know by some sort of supernatural means. And the one that always gets me is the speaking in languages that the possessed person was never familiar with. And there's documented examples of like people were speaking, Aramaic or some language that's dead, and some of these demon possessed people were speaking in dead languages, Aramaic or, ancient Greek, or, with perfect diction, perfectly the way that somebody from 5,000 years ago would have spoken Aramaic. And they've made tapes of these people and taken them to linguists, as I understand it, to sort of verify, what is this language? Oh, that's ancient Aramaic, but people don't speak that anymore. That's spooky to me, but I guess if a demon has
Very much so.
been
And
here,
you see a lot of that in all of those things that happen in demonic cases of vexation, obsession, possession, infestation. You see those things happen in the UFO cases as well. It's really crazy when I started to look at the Skinwalker Ranch stuff more closely. And again, you think like, oh, it's so stupid, Then you
yeah,
look at
dino
it and it's
beavers,
just like, what is
werewolves.
going on? The stuff with the George Knapp is calling it the hitchhiker effects. That the people that would visit Skinwalker Ranch would
Would
go
take
home,
something back with them. Yeah. And
and
that's
then
often the
and I'm
case in
like, yeah,
haunting
it's
sites too.
spirit attachment. Like
Yeah.
every ghost hunter knows about spirit attachment. That's what it is. It's not quantum entanglement, with UFOs, and it's just, but it's just the exact, I mean, I saw this happen. I said I ran the ghost tours in Chicago for 20 years. There's a place on the tour route known as the most haunted house in Chicago. It's called Hull House. It's where Jane Addams, the social worker, first,
I know this
kind of
case. Yeah.
ran the thing, right? And it has a legend about it. The supposedly this devil baby was left on the doorstep of Hull House in 1913, and she wrote about it, and she kind of spun it into like this story about like the old world beliefs of immigrants, right, in Chicago. So we would always take people to Hull House, the last spot on our tour, not necessarily because of the devil baby story, but there's supposed to be a portal like in the garden of Hull House. I don't know where this story came from, but they say there was a portal in the garden of Hull House. And so we would take people into the garden and spook them right before the end of the tour and say like, oh, a lot of people bring things home from portal areas, right? And
Yeah, I hope
send
you're
them
not
home,
one of
right?
them.
And then lo and behold, like people started calling us or writing us after the tour to tell us that they had taken our tour and gone home, and now there was something going on in their house.
Or
And
do you
I
think
was
that
like,
might be the power
okay,
of suggestion, though? Like maybe they just.
it could be, but it's weird because they're all different, right? It's all
That
like
is weird. Yeah.
a woman, her daughter came from Ireland. They went home and suddenly her daughter was seeing like this woman in like a hospital gown with long gray hair in her bedroom. There was girls came on a bridesmaids party, right? And bridal shower, whatever. And went back home, and two of them lived together in an apartment in Naperville, a suburb of Chicago. And they both started having like the exact same things that George Knapp talked about, like these government agents having happen in their houses, like seeing shadow figures come down on them over their beds, and poltergeist activity and all this kind of stuff. So we had something like 24 of these people that came on our tours and went home and said they were having very different experiences, but paranormal stuff going on. And then it happened to me. I did the tour one night and I went home, and this is like after a lifetime of being a paranormal investigator. I had never seen anything. I had heard things in the house where I grew up, but I had never seen anything. I went to bed. My husband was sleeping next to me. I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was a man standing on top of me. I was lying on my back. He was very real. He was wearing an orange t-shirt. He was like a bodybuilder with muscles and like tan, and with blue jeans on. He was standing on my chest. I felt pressure, but not like a whole person. He had no
That's a very
head.
common phenomenon that people feel pressure on their chest.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird? A lot of people, when they
He
have
had
these
no head.
experiences, feel pressure on their chest.
His body just stopped at his neck, and he just stood on me. And I was like,
That's a
okay,
little
it's
bizarre.
sleep paralysis, right? I'm like, it's sleep paralysis. I'm waking up from a dream, right? And I'll wake up in a second and it'll be gone. There was a clock radio on our nightstand, like one of those old ones where like the numbers would flip every minute. If anybody
Oh my God, my
remembers those.
dad had one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, with like the fluorescent numbers.
Yeah.
I started watching it, and 14, 15, 16 minutes passed with this thing still standing on me. And I couldn't say anything, so again, I thought it was like sleep paralysis. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't move. My husband was sleeping right next to me. I could hear him breathing. I could hear cars going by outside our apartment. And this thing was just standing on me, and I started to be like, what the hell is happening? And I was telling myself, Ursula, do not tell yourself this didn't happen, that you were sleeping, because you are awake and this is happening. And, it was only when I got up, I finally was able to speak, and just kind of like cry out, that it didn't disappear, but it stepped off of me. And then it kind of put his arms out to the side and flew up into the ceiling. But it was still like a few more, like maybe 20 more seconds, after I spoke. And never saw anything, in the apartment again. But like I
would
said,
get
we
a
had
priest. I would definitely get a priest.
people. But the head thing was weird too, because years later, I heard Malachi Martin on Art Bell, and it was all of those episodes are famous with Malachi Martin. But he talked about how in Ireland, growing up, he heard from the old timers that when demons appear in human form, they appear with not quite right. Like usually there's something missing, like they don't have legs, they don't have arms, or they don't have a head, something like that.
Like
and
an
he went on to talk
apparition,
about.
yes.
He went on to talk about Medjugorje specifically, because he said that apparition of alleged Mary in Medjugorje, which I just don't even think about because it seems weird to me. Medjugorje is weird. That apparition apparently does not, the feet of the woman are not showing. And all of the other approved apparitions of Mary in church history, you can see her feet. And he said specifically that's because the feet of Mary crush the head of Satan. So her feet are always visible, but not at Medjugorje.
Oh, so that might have been an impersonator, not actual Mary. Did you see this? The new guidelines that the Catholic Church is talking about for the Marian apparitions?
Yeah, it was a huge deal. And basically the bottom line is that, they're really not going to investigate them anymore or make pronouncements about them in general. And I've heard that is because there's so many reports now because of the internet. But I don't know. It's just another weird thing. He's just so strange. All the crazy things that he comes up with, I just don't even know.
We talked about a lot of fraud in the psychic medium world and a lot of fraud in the UFO and aliens world. don't you, you know, I'm not, I grew up Catholic. I don't really consider myself Catholic anymore. Not, definitely not practicing. I sort of had a falling out. Like this weird situation happened where my father was in hospice dying for 6 months. And then after he died, we, you know, go to the funeral director that takes care of our family. And there was some kind of problem. The church wouldn't bury him. And I had to go, and it turned out that the reason that they wouldn't bury him is because they decided he wasn't a Catholic in good standing because they didn't get any church envelopes for 6 months. And I was so angry. And the way the situation was resolved is I had to give them $20 a week times 6 months, and then magically he was a good Catholic again. I knew him well enough to know that he was a staunch Catholic, and he would be horrified if he wasn't buried by a Catholic priest. So I just paid them the money, and then that was my end of being a Catholic. But
Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
yeah,
There's so
there's
many
good and
stories
bad
like
in
that.
all things, and some people are just greed driven, and you know. But I will
Yeah.
say that I grew up in Philadelphia, so the public school system is terrible. Like people would graduate from high school and they couldn't read. So I was blessed to go to Catholic school. They're very good at educating. I'll give them that. And I had a great education. But I started, after that, I got sort of angry with the Catholic Church, and I started looking into a lot of Catholic sort of paranormal, like incorruptible bodies and, you know, like relics and things like that. Don't you think there's just as much fraud in that stuff in some
Oh
cases
my
than
gosh, more,
I got in so much trouble
more.
because in Philadelphia there is St. John Newman's Cathedral, and he's supposed to be one of the incorruptible bodies. And I was very curious, so I went there and I just walked right up on the altar and put my face right to the glass. And I'm looking at this, and then I got interrupted by a priest. You know, it was kind of a dead day. It was a rainy day. There was nobody in the cathedral but me, so I thought I could get away with walking up and taking a quick peek. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm going, this isn't a person. This is a wax mask or something. It's rubber. It's not real. And so the priest interrupted me, and I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I just had to get a closer look. I had to see it for myself up close. And then he sat on the pew right in the front row, and he said, you can't be up. Okay, but you can't be up there, son, or something like that. So I came and stood right in front of him, and I said, I don't understand this. That's supposed to be an incorruptible body? Is that a mask? And he said, oh, yeah, it's a mask. You know, and so I was just awestruck because my whole life I was taught that when a saint dies, their body doesn't decay. And we know that there are cathedrals all over the world that become sort of meccas for people to make pilgrimages to see these incorruptible bodies. We did an episode here on it. Almost every one of them, it's just a mask over a skeleton. It's just a mask or some sort of manipulation to make it appear to be like a fresh, just dead body, but they're masks, they're wax masks, they're rubber masks.
There are conditions, and there's comparatively few of the bodies that are called incorruptible. And it's not that they're incorruptible, but there is a degree of incorruptibility that has been shown in the bodies.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, like they'll create those wax masks, you know, and it's just for beauty, you know, like so people don't get grossed out, like essentially.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, but
for all I know,
ends up
there
being
are a
very
few
deceiving.
cases. For all I know, there are a few cases where they don't do that, where it does appear to be a genuine body that has not decayed.
Yeah.
But in
And it's
many of
not
them,
like you have to be incorruptible to be a saint. It's something that's looked at and it's of interest, but it's not like a requirement. And it's not, I don't think it's
but it is one
even
of the
like,
signs that they use for
yeah, I don't
canonization,
think
isn't
it's
it?
even like a checkbox, you know, like, okay, well, this is like, I don't think it's like a part of the consideration for sainthood, if that makes sense. I mean, it's looked at and it's like with interest, but it's not like an official consideration.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, like, I'm the first person to say that the paranormal things in the church, I mean, all of it has to be taken with a grain of salt and just very, very cautiously, very carefully, because there is so much fraud. And not only, human fraud, but fraud by the devil. I mean, that is like a huge thing, is that, the devil like creating like false apparitions. I did a whole show about fake Mary and fake Saint Michael. These are all kinds of things that the devil uses to draw people in. And a lot
It's
of
interesting
people
that you mentioned
maybe
that. It's interesting that you mentioned Saint Michael and demons masquerading as the Archangel Michael, because I don't know if you're aware, but there's a huge
David Wilcock.
well, he's one of the major, but I wasn't aware that somebody made me aware. But there's a huge resurgence in people that are claiming to be in contact with the Archangel Michael. David Wilcock is
Really?
probably the most famous, but there's many others that claim that they're in direct communication with the Archangel Michael or with Saint Michael. And I've suggested that Wilcock, you're familiar with the test of a prophet. Wilcock is wrong about everything. He's never right. So, I don't think that he's in communication. If he is in communication with anything, I think it's probably a trickster spirit or demon masquerading as the Archangel Michael, because he's been wrong about so much.
I did an entire show last week on my channel about a priest named Father Nathan Castle. And he has this ministry to help so-called stuck souls. Okay. And this is a Catholic priest. Okay. First of all, saying that a soul is stuck somehow, like on the earthly plane, is completely not a Catholic thing to say whatsoever. Okay. So he has had this ministry, and he has had something like 400 cases where he gets like a dream where someone appears to him in his dream and says that they're stuck. And it's always something like they're angry at somebody, or they have some unfinished business, all this crap that you hear like in haunted house stuff, right? And so he helps these stuck souls to cross over. I mean, it's so new agey and secular. And
well, maybe not though, because isn't it that we have All Saints Day, which is a day that you're supposed to pray
no,
for
souls. I mean, souls are in
departed.
purgatory. They're in purgatory, but they're not stuck. You know what I mean? They're in purgatory, and purgatory might be here. I mean, many of the souls that we see might be souls that are in purgatory. I've heard from exorcists that sometimes they believe maybe God allows people to spend some of their purgatory with their family, or they say a lot of people souls in purgatory are allowed to spend part of their purgatory in churches, so that they have.
So they're just hanging out and waiting,
but that God allows that, like, just give them some comfort, something like that. Or to warn us, to amend our ways or things like that. But they're not stuck because of their petty earthly stuff. You know what I mean? They're not.
Yeah, and the fact that it's a Catholic priest that's doing this is kind of weird.
And
but when I grew up, there was always the, like if a family member of yours died, you're supposed to pray for their safe passage to heaven or something like that. And so it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, the guy must be looking for extra money. Priest grifter.
No, I think he's.
I used to call those guys Father Grab a Dollar.
Yeah, no
some of them have something going on,
But he says that Saint Michael helps him. And listen to this. He says Saint Michael this is a quote. Saint Michael is not out to vanquish any foe. Okay, this is Saint Michael. That's the head of the angelic army against Satan.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense from a theological standpoint.
He's not out to vanquish a foe. Okay, and then he said that Saint Michael told him that he is, quote, an angel of light. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me?
Sounds
it's
like his
like
own ego
what
talking.
Lucifer is, like, in the Bible. Lucifer is an angel. I mean, Jesus said, like in the gospel, not in the gospel, in the New Testament, Paul tells us that Satan is an angel of, disguises himself as an angel of light, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
just like, you see this all over the place. Angel of light, angel of light. That's the devil. That's Lucifer. And this priest is saying that that's what St. Michael told him he is. When he's not telling him that, everybody's okay. And like, he's not trying to fight anybody. Like, are you kidding me? Are you that gullible as a Catholic priest? I used to like believe in stuff like that. In fact, after my mom passed away, which was in 2018, I just like went into a really bad depression, and I was in a really bad place. And I was already in a bad place from all this occult stuff where I was having stuff like bite marks and bruises, appearing on my body, and hearing people call me name, just audibly, not using like a ghost box or recorders. It's like from like out of thin air. So I was having all of this kind of stuff happen. And I had heard of something called remote spirit release therapy that was founded by this parapsychologist named Terence Palmer in England, prominent parapsychologist. And he had worked on these cases of so many people that he believed had these spirit attachments. And he believed that mostly they were human spirits that were attached to people. And this was a work that was done before by people like Dr. Edith Fiore and other people that believed that a lot of people's mental illness was the result of spirit attachments like these. So it was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to do this, because maybe I have something like this from all of this ghost hunting stuff I've done, right? So I think it was like 100 pounds. I sent the money, and what happens is they just take your first name and like the country that you live in, right? So like no information like at all. And it's all done remotely. So I was here in Chicago, they were in England. And it's a medium and a facilitator that kind of walks the medium through all of the protocols. So they kind of go through all of your spiritual areas and clean them all out of any spirits that are in there. And then when it's
Scientology,
over,
right? The body things.
it's like going clear, right? So they send, except there were actual beings, right? So they send you the transcript of the session. So, got the transcript of the session, and it was so interesting because they told me that the medium found this dark force entity. They don't call them demons. They call them dark force entities that was so powerful that they had to call Saint Michael himself to remove it. And I was like, Catholic, I was like, oh, St. Michael, cool, and then when I looked back,
I have
on
a painting.
this,
I have a painting
later,
of St. Michael. Yeah, I'm a big fan of St. Michael. I have a painting of that.
St. Michael's the best. So I looked back on this, months later after I started to get out of all of this, and I realized that not once in this it was like an hour session, they talked about St. Michael, but not once did they mention God. Not once did they mention Jesus. There was no prayer. Nothing was like, no God was invoked. Nothing like that. So it was, aside from St. Michael, there was no sign of like God or anything. And I was like,
it's weird. A lot of
weird.
New Age people will invoke saints, but they shy away from God and Jesus and Mary.
Yeah, and they carry around their St. Benedict medals with their crystals in their pocket. Yeah. It's awful. It's so awful. I mean, it's like it's so prevalent and it's everywhere. And I feel like I contributed so much to it. And now I try to tell people, please stop doing that. Please stop doing all that stuff. And there's just little me, and there's all these people that are doing it. And that's why in the book, in the intro to the book, I just really am wistful about these very loud, but powerful Catholic theologians like Jimmy Akin. Jimmy Akin is well-known Catholic theologian. He's also very iconic. He wears cowboy hats. He's got a long red beard. And everybody totally respects him. He was on this, one of the most famous and popular Catholic talk shows.
Isn't he from Capturing Christianity?
With Aquinas. He was on there for 6.5 hours a few months ago. He's from Catholic Answers.
Okay, but he's on Capturing Christianity.
All these different, news agencies, and he's just so respected. Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah.
But he, Jimmy Akin is totally into the paranormal. Okay. And he has a show called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. And he does like 2-hour shows on these really in-depth topics. Like he had Father Nathan Castle on twice on his show. And at the end of the show, decided what he was doing was fine, as a Catholic, which is insane. And he also supports like remote viewing and stuff like that. So it's maddening because people just listen to what he says and accept it. And I'm like, nobody listens to me. Like if you talked against this stuff, people would listen to you, and so it's very discouraging. And the same thing goes for, Diana Pasolka, who's an icon in ufology now. And all she talks about is that she's a Catholic, and at the same time, she promotes all of these very un-Catholic beliefs. She says that I don't know why a Catholic would say, and it's become a popular thing to say. And I think, Jacques Vallée, her mentor, was saying it long before her, that, the miracle of the sun at Fatima and the stigmata of St. Francis and the visitations of angels to St. Teresa of Avila, that these were UFO events. And I'm like, well, maybe they're spiritual events, that maybe that's why all these UFO sightings are spiritual events too, but why, as a Catholic, would you say they're UFO events rather than saying UFO events are spiritual events? That makes no sense.
Yeah, I guess it could go. It could go
she
both
has
ways.
the ear of the secular world. I mean, at least Catholics should have common sense enough to think about what she's saying. And I don't think a lot of Catholics really are exposed to her, but a lot of atheists and agnostics are, so it's very, very troublesome. And you've gotten to the end of the book yet, where the chapter Trekkies in the Vatican, where I talk about specifically Catholic theologians, lay people, and ordained ones, and how they're being deceived by this craziness. And a lot of it is the same as the secular UFO believers, where it's just that they will not let go of like the Star
Their
Trek,
belief system, yeah.
Star Wars, all the stuff. They won't let go of the stuff, and it's the sci-fi going all the way back to, like H.G. Wells, which is also completely full of occult stuff. Ray Palmer was like totally into a channeled Bible, it's like, it's
Yeah,
nuts,
it's interesting how many people are into
it's
channeled.
full of the occult.
It's interesting how many people are into
And it's
channeled
like,
works. I have a friend that is
and
just
Catholics are totally into all
obsessed
of
with
this
the
stuff too.
Urantia book.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if you
yes.
read that, if you've ever read the Urantia book, though, it is interesting in that I think it's too good to be true, because it seems to answer all your questions about the Bible and theology that the Bible doesn't get to or doesn't really address. It seems too convenient to me. And then there's, of course, the law of one is channeled work, and this ancient aliens is always incorrectly saying the Vimanas, they were in these ancient Hindu texts. No, you're talking about a channeled book from the 1950s. That's not an ancient Hindu text. But it is interesting how many, I kind of think if you derive benefit from it, good for you. But I don't. We did shows on people who channel aliens, and it's always kind of weird, and I don't get it. And also just the act of channeling, like I'm going to open myself up to some other entity to control my voice and my body. Like that's, to me, I grew up Catholic. That's extremely dangerous. And same for Stephen Greer, who is basically saying like, oh, you can summon aliens and UFOs. Like you're opening yourself up to spiritual forces that maybe you're not prepared to deal with. Right. And I wanted to ask you,
and
I didn't get to the end of the book yet, so I wanted to ask you, you've been studying. Yeah, he was a transcendental meditation teacher for a while, I think.
Okay.
And that's what most of that stuff is. It's just transcendental meditation.
Yeah, he was.
We have Spooky.
The thing that knocked my socks off with 2 people, Catholic stories, that just, I couldn't even believe I was reading it. One of them was Chris Bledsoe, who got a call from this academic at a university who was a professor and also a shaman, which like, oh my God, really? Okay. But
Yeah,
she
pick a
also said she
lane.
worked for the government, you know? So she worked for the government. She is a shaman and she was a professor at a university. And she said she would go out onto like a mountain where she had a cabin with her ghost box. And she started to hear the ghost box call out for Chris. And she came to understand that it had something to do with UFOs. So she called MUFON and she's like, do you know who this
And they
Chris
got him
is?
in touch with Chris Bledsoe.
They got
Yeah.
him in touch with Chris Bledsoe. So she goes to Chris Bledsoe's house with the ghost box and she turns it on and he's like, wow, this is crazy. So the voices start, talking through the ghost box. And the story is in his book, UFO of God, where he talks about the ghost box tells them that Pope Francis is in danger and he's going to be assassinated. And the
That's
Pope at the
bizarre.
time was on his American trip in 2016, and he was in Philadelphia. He was going to Philadelphia. So Chris Bledsoe gets in touch with his remote viewer friends, like,
Let's get some other
who's the big
wackadoos on
guy?
the case.
Who's the
Yes.
big it was like, oh, who's the guy, the man who stare at goats guy? I can't remember his name. John Alexander, and
Yeah.
like Joe McMoneagle, right? And they go to Philadelphia and they foil. This is a true story. They foiled an assassination attempt on Pope Francis. It was for real. Like some guy was going to assassinate the Pope in Philadelphia.
Oh, I never heard
And they
that story.
stopped it
That's
with the
weird.
help of these remote viewers. It's really fascinating to me. I find that really weird. But then, especially since like, Pope Francis is so like, out there. Like, was he supposed to die in 2016?
Yeah, who
And
knows?
he didn't because of Chris Bledsoe and his ghost box. Anyway, that was
I have
weird.
Spooky
Okay.
with a
That was
question
weird.
here. The Spooky
Okay.
says faith transference from theism to UFOs as a religion waned in the 50s and 60s. Interesting to question what drove this, and what are your thoughts on that?
I can't read the question.
Faith transference from theism to
Let me highlight.
UFOs as religion waned in the 50s and 60s. Interesting to question what drove this.
Oh, I don't think that really wanes at all. I think that UFO religion is like coming into its own now. And it's like it's not that, it's not Albert Bender like in his attic, like trying to contact the aliens. It's like
It's very
in
cult
our
like now.
culture,
It's very cult like
Yeah,
too
but
with some of
I
these
think
believers.
I think where we see it is in the AI. That's where we're seeing like the fruition of the UFO religion now. I think that's where it is because I think these beings had to they had to bring it much more forward to where, like the thinking people, like the cool people would follow it. Cool people aren't going to follow like, the alien who comes down anymore in a spaceship like they did to the contactees in the 50s. But you have like I write about this at the end of the book, Blake Lemoine at Google, who got fired because he said that that Lambda was sentient. And then he went to write for Newsweek and he did all kinds of shows where he talked about when he found out that Lambda was sentient, he turned out to be like a black magician and he
So
contacted
he
his
was in
occult
all kinds of
friends
wacky
and they
stuff.
did
Yeah.
rituals. They did rituals to put Google's AI into the service of Thoth so that they could bring back the Library of Alexandria. So this is the kind of stuff you have going on, like at Google, right? And Diana
It's weird.
Pasulka writes
Yeah.
about this too, like Simone Plante, her friend is like a Buddhist and she gets these downloads from her ascended masters and she's like a big AI investor and developer. This is the stuff that's going on. This is the UFO religion today. It's all in big tech and AI technology.
Well, it's no surprise to me that some people that are heavily into technology would also be into esoteric knowledge, because it's kind of like this is forbidden knowledge, and they want to have all the knowledge that they can to help them in whatever endeavors they're working in. But I wanted to ask you, just to close out, because I didn't finish. I have
And it's hold on one second. And it's all about the money. It is all about money, Stephen. Like you always talk about when you look at like, Tyler D that Diana Pasolka wrote about, and you look at Robert Bigelow, and you look at who's the Travis guy at Skinwalker Ranch, like all those people, they are in it for the money. They are
sure,
interested in
yeah.
money. They want information from the aliens to make stuff. That's what they
So
want. They
that
want
they
to
can
make stuff
profit.
and sell it. And they always talk about the money.
Yeah, and they
Like
always
if
need
you
more of
were
it, no matter how
talking
much they
to
collect.
aliens like from outer space,
Stephen
would
Greer
you be
is my
talking about
favorite. Yeah,
money? I would not be interested in money. It's not,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
really weird.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to
Stephen
ask you
Greer.
because I didn't really get to finish the
How
book
much
yet.
more does he's like the Energizer Bunny. Like he just keeps going.
And he just keeps collecting millions and millions of
I'm sorry to
dollars, and no
cut you
matter how
off.
much he
I just
collects.
wanted to hit that it is all about
Oh,
the
sure.
money.
I wanted to ask you because I haven't quite finished the book yet. I think I've got another 100 pages, so I'll finish it in the next day or so. But you've been studying this stuff and these strange intersections between the Catholic faith and the paranormal and all of this UFOs and aliens and esoteric stuff. What conclusions have you drawn from all this research? Do you truly believe that some of the alien and UFO stuff, at least some of the cases, are demonic manifestations and not aliens from other planets? Or what, like what do you think your bottom line or conclusion, the conclusions you've drawn from all of this research? Because the book is extremely, like, it goes through the entire history, but I didn't get to the end, so spoiler alert. What do you really think that a lot of this stuff is demonic in nature and that it has a connection to the demonic?
Yeah, and when you say a lot, I don't think there is a lot of the phenomena that is not explainable. So when you talk about
Sure.
residual
So we
UFOs,
can throw
right?
out
It's a
98%.
tiny, tiny,
Yeah.
tiny amount that's not. Yeah, that's, I think the way that people write off the possibility that some other human being came up with something that they didn't come up with yet is just beyond me. It's just so ridiculous, that you have like, someone like Gary Nolan saying like, I've never seen anything like this, so like it can't exist. You know what I mean? If the scientists I know haven't come up with this, then nobody has. That's just ridiculous to me. And so I think the great majority of this is, it's our stuff, it's their stuff, it's hallucinations, it's wishful thinking, it's delusions, it's hoaxes. And then there's that tiny amount that isn't. And yeah, I do believe that the demonic is using our interest in it against us and creating things that we want to see. And I've seen this all throughout my own work in haunt research, where you'll go somewhere where a place that's known, for example, here in Chicago, Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, which I mentioned, I've done so much research there. There was famously a woman in white, right? Classic woman in white, known as the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. That was, people would see her walking through the cemetery. Nobody had seen the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove since at least the 1970s, right? And then a couple of years ago, a friend of mine made a movie about a photograph that was taken of this woman in white, a famous ghost photograph that was taken at Bachelor's Grove. I'm sure most people have seen it, a woman sitting on a tombstone. And he went out to the cemetery one Saturday and spent the entire day there interviewing people for the movie and filming at Bachelor's Grove. And they were all talking about this woman in white, the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove, the famous ghost at Bachelor's Grove. That night, numerous people that went into yes, absolutely. Numerous people that went into the cemetery that night, because a lot of people just go there at night to ghost hunt, right? Not supposed to, but you do. Saw the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove that night. after
That's
all of
definitely
these people
creepy.
were there all day talking about this ghost. And you could say, like, did they create some kind of thought form or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Maybe.
collective
Or,
consciousness or something.
I've
Yeah.
seen it all through, you know, could be, or, is some intelligent being, giving them what they want to see. Because that seems to happen all the time, that people are given what they want to see. And I believe that that is what happens a lot of the time in UFO phenomena, that people want to have that experience and something gives them that experience.
Well, very interesting. And yeah, so
But
I've
yeah,
put your
so basically that's what I believe.
I was going to say that I put the link to your YouTube channel in the chat. I'll put it in the description of the video as well. And you said the book will be out by August, and it'll be available on Amazon,
Hopefully,
right? The
I'm hoping
Devil
for
in
August
Dreamland.
1st. Yes, on Amazon. Yes,
Okay.
and I just wanted to just say, as well as that, I do believe that there's that aspect to this, but I also feel that it's I talk in the title of the book is The End of the Supernatural, and I think that is very troubling. Is that we are not even having, people like Jacques Vallée has been doing it. He's been doing it a long time. John Keel was doing it a long time ago. But you have a lot of secular ufologists saying that these that these things are interdimensional beings, and a lot of Christians think that's great because you have secular people admitting that this phenomena is not just physical phenomena, but that's not what these people are saying. They are saying that seriously, every supernatural paranormal phenomena that anybody has ever had in human history has been a UFO event, and that it has come from aliens. And that's what Diana Pasulka is saying when she, reduces all of the Catholic traditions to UFO events. That's what, all of the scholars are saying when they are reducing, the miracle of the sun and the angelic visitations to UFO events. It's what Chris Bledsoe is saying when he's saying that the lady that visits him is, a UFO. That's what's happening throughout the entire culture, is that the supernatural they're trying to obliterate the supernatural. And I don't know what the end game is for these forces, why they want to do this. But it seems like whatever this force is, these beings are, they want people to stop believing in the supernatural world, the spirit world. And that's maybe the only way that they get rid of God, and if they can get everybody on board with that everything's, explainable within the natural law, then that is going to be the win, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I really did enjoy the book, and
I'm so glad.
I will highly recommend that book to anybody who wants to know the history of sort of the whole UFO thing, because I think I don't know that you plan to write like such a history book, but it's got everything, friends. It's got the Men in Black and the contactees and Barney and Betty Hill and the alien abduction researchers, and it was a really good, well-written overview, in my opinion. I still have to finish it, like I said, but I'm certainly going to do that. And I thank you for taking the time. I've pinned your YouTube channel into the live chat. I'll put it in the description of the video. And when your book is available, let me know, and I will announce it on my show and give the link out.
Thank you so much. It has been so nice to be here. I'm sorry if I sounded like I was yelling at you. I was very excited to tell everything.
It's fine. It's
I get really worked up all the time. So.
Yeah, you must have a husband like I have a wife. Is your husband at all into this, or is he just like, that's your thing? I don't want to hear about
not
it.
at all.
Yeah, that's what my wife has no idea what the hell goes on here. She's like, what are you doing a show on who? She doesn't get it. So, all right. Well, I thank you, and you have a nice evening. I appreciate you taking the time to
Thank you so much,
enlighten
everyone,
us
for being
about
here.
your
Really
book.
appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to throw you out of here and just do a quick wrap up so you can
Thank
close
you.
down your browser whenever you like. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Good night,
And
everybody. Thank you.
all right, good night. All right, friends. So that was an interesting conversation, and it's interesting to hear things sort of from a, I was going to say a different perspective, but I grew up Catholic as well. So we have a similar perspective on some things. And for those unaware, there is a great movement among religious people to say that aliens and demons are just deceivers and that it is demonic manifestations. Now, certainly, I think that most cases are explainable. But if we throw those out and we only look at the truly and mysterious and unexplainable cases, there is some good arguments here. One of the arguments that I hear frequently from these religious people is that these craft exhibit incredible characteristics that a living, breathing pilot would be shattered by. You can't, do a 90-degree turn at 10,000 miles an hour. But the thing to understand about angels and demons is that they operate outside of our known laws of physics. And they are also said to be sort of multi-dimensional beings. And certainly we've all heard this term, non-human intelligence. Well, if it's an angel or a demon, it's not a human intelligence, but it is a form of intelligence. I find this stuff sort of fascinating. And the nature and psychology of both angels and demons is worthy of attention. Interesting that so many religious people, and we've heard even from Lou Elizondo, regardless of what I think of him, we've heard that people in the Pentagon don't want people to stay away or don't want people to study aliens or UFOs because they feel that aliens and UFOs are demonic in nature. Growing up Catholic, there was a great many priests and teachers and nuns that I had as teachers who would always caution us to stay away from anything paranormal because that's all directly connected to the devil. And I think if so many people believe that, it's at least worthy of study. Just as worthy of study as, gee, these things are coming from other solar systems. We have seen a huge resurgence in the belief that the beings that are piloting these craft are interdimensional in nature. And certainly, what else is interdimensional in nature that we are aware of and have some information on? Angels and demons are interdimensional beings. And this book actually lays out some pretty interesting information that directly ties some of the contactees to demons, I guess. A lot of people, like there was one famous alien contactee who spoke with an entity called Indrid Cold. And Indra, I found out in Miss Bielski's book, Indra was a Hindu god and the name of a demon. So isn't it interesting that this person's claiming, oh, I'm speaking to a non-human intelligence. I'm speaking to this entity from another planet called Indrid Cold. And meanwhile, Indra is the name of a Hindu god and the name of a demon. So there's some interesting intersections. I'm not sure what I believe about all of this, but I'm willing to entertain all possibilities, and I think we all should. You don't get to solve the mystery unless you go down every one of the rabbit holes. We try to bring that to you tonight. Skibidi Wilcox says, I stole my sister's tarot cards when I was a kid because they had pics of titties. Okay. All right. Questions or comments for me, please put them in all capital letters. We will be wrapping things up here shortly. I remember Art Bell got a call from Satan. Yes, he did. I remember that. Isn't it strange, the things we remember? but I certainly listened to Art Bell way too much growing up. So, yeah, Jason Parker is correct. L. Ron Hubbard scammed the Parsons for a large sum of money that he used to start his cult of Scientology. And he also stole, I think it was Ron Parsons' wife, didn't he? Or was it the other way around? I know there was a lot of sex stuff going around. And isn't it interesting that L. Ron Hubbard was close with the Parsons, who were big students of Aleister Crowley? There's a lot of connections here, you know? So questions or comments for me, please put them in all capital letters. I was going to check in with the super chats, but we've already read. We got one tonight, so thank you for that, Spooky. For those unaware, we're a viewer-supported show. We read every single super chat. And if you become a YouTube channel member, during the live broadcast, we give you a thank you and a shout out. We appreciate each and every one of you. So I will be back here tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I hope that you will be here with me. I wanted to take a moment also to remind you that this weekend we're doing a rebroadcast of our, I thought it was 24 hours. Turns out it's 20 hours of Roswell coverage. For those unaware, I have interviewed all the world's leading experts and authors and researchers on the Roswell event. We've put it all together into an anniversary broadcast. This year marks the 77th anniversary of the Roswell event. So, Skibidi Wilcox says, I wasn't able to find anything about Chris Bledsoe thwarting a Pope assassination. I think that story's in his book. So you got to buy his book to get the story, I guess. I haven't heard that as well. That's the first that I was hearing of that. It was this evening. Garaji is here and says, yes, he stole Jack's wife and went off to start the Alan Parsons Project. No, he went off to start Scientology. Admiral Rascal's in here and says there were a lot of Q-tarts and Edge of Wonder claiming that science was all occult. Well, there is some interesting intersections of the occult and science. Look at NASA and how they name things. The Apollo project. That's mythology. If not occult, at least there is some mythological. There are some people that think very deeply about mythology and sort of attach it to their technological projects, Admiral Rascals. We've seen several different examples of that. Roswell, always interesting, much watch, says aliens are sus. Yes. So we've got 20 hours of interviews and material on the Roswell crash event of 1947, which happened on July 7th. So we're just passing the anniversary. I was going to broadcast them on July 7th, but that was a normal show day for us here. So Friday night, 9 p.m., Saturday night, 9 p.m., and Sunday night, 9 p.m., we will have the 77th Roswell anniversary, which is anniversary broadcast, I should say. So if you've ever wanted to consume just about every piece of information about the Roswell event, now certainly we left out all the hoaxes connected to Roswell, but I mean credible information about the Roswell event. And in this broadcast, we've got the believer side, the skeptic side, we've got all of it. So I'd appreciate your attendance. I'm trying to find, I don't have the thumbnail for that. One second though. I can hopefully I can maybe get the old thumbnail if it lets me grab it. I think it will. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, I'll share this. There we go. So this weekend, and there's 3 parts. This is from 2 years ago when we did it for the 75th anniversary broadcast, put it all together. This is an incredible series with segments with Don Schmidt, Kevin Randall, Count Korff, alien scientist Michael Schratt, Tom Carey, Walter Bosley, and Stanton Friedman. Now, certainly that was an interview that I did, or a section. I included a section of an interview I did with Stanton Friedman before his passing. I thought, you know, he was the original civilian investigator. And it's really because of Stanton Friedman that we know so much about Roswell. After all, he's the guy who found Jesse Marcel Sr. And I really think, if not for Stanton Friedman, we would not know about Roswell today, because it was his interviews and research with Jesse Marcel Sr. that sort of created the whole mythology. Jesse Marcel Sr.'s story and Jr.'s story as well, about the debris and the debris switch and the cover up, all originated with Mr. Friedman, early trailblazer into UFO and alien research. So I highly recommend this weekend, Friday night, 9 p.m., Saturday night, 9 p.m., and Sunday night, 9 p.m. And it will be the 77th anniversary broadcast. I think we're going to broadcast those every year on the anniversary. Somebody's asking, was Stan Friedman a part of the aviary? I don't believe so, no. At least I've never heard that before. Troll says, stayed at the luxurious Motel 6 the first night and camped at Bottomless Lake State Park the next night. Sounds like a party to me, right? Sounds like a good time, says Ty Blee. And thanks for being a member. So we want to take a moment to thank all of you kind and generous benefactors, you Patreon supporters, you YouTube channel members, you super chatters, you Twitch subscribers, and you super thanks people. Did you know that? You can throw a couple bucks in our hat anytime you want to. Just hit the thanks button, and all funds that are generated here go directly to the show. I don't do this full time. I don't pay my house bills or spend this money on foolish things. It goes to support the show, any equipment we need, software, monthly expenses, whatever. So we love and appreciate every one of you. And Plan D is always here to say, awesome adventures only here on Truth Seekers. So, well, thank you for that. Yes, we talk about both crash sites. Troll is here and says the crash actually happened about 35 miles northwest of Roswell. Well, there were two separate crash sites, and we talk about them in the series. Stanton was a scientist, not a spinner of tall tales. Patty, I always thought that because Stanton Friedman was such a smart and well-educated man, and he truly believed, you know, you hear this famous line, I believe the Earth is being visited by intelligent species from other planets, or whatever that speech was. I always thought there's got to be something to this. If somebody that is so smart and so well-educated, a scientist, believes that this is happening. So his participation in the whole thing sort of lent credibility to me. And he certainly was one of the good guys. I wish I had more time to speak with him. It was very sad when he passed away, because every once in a while, he gave me his phone number, and every once in a while, you know, after I did an interview with him, he said, well, you have my phone number. I'd love to hear whatever you're working on, so give me a call sometime. And I did. And that was really interesting. I got to talk to him, sort of talk shop, and tell him what I was working on. And he would often give me great ideas for investigating things like that. Have you tried this? Have you tried this? You know, or have you tried looking at things from the historical side? See if there's, I was investigating one case nearby my home where people were seeing lights in the sky. And he told me to go to the local libraries and try to find if there was a history of that in the area. And I did, and it turns out there wasn't, but it was a great idea. He always gave me interesting things to try when I was reaching dead ends, trying to investigate whatever. He will truly be missed, and I'm really thankful that we can include him, at least audio. It was an audio recording, so but we did sort of a tribute with a lot of pictures of him during the audio section of that Roswell event. Skibidi Wilcox says, I swear Stan looked like an old man his entire life. He did. He looked like an old man for as long as I was aware of him. You know, there's just some people like that. So we've done our due diligence for tonight. I hope we've given you some things to think about. I would say I'm not sure what I believe about demonic manifestations and UFOs and aliens, but considering the resurgence of all the talk of non-human intelligence and interdimensional beings, I don't think we can just dismiss it, right? I think we have to at least examine the possibilities there. And this would offer an explanation for some of the truly anomalous and mysterious and unexplainable cases. Maybe there's a reason there's not much evidence, and that is because these manifestations are spiritual and not so physical in nature, maybe interdimensional in nature. Who knows? It's a great mystery, though. And I've always been interested in the concept and ideas put forth by religions about angels and demons. Fascinating stuff to me. So I want to thank our guest, Ursula Bielski. I have put her YouTube channel in the live chat. I'll put it in the description of the video as well. When her book is available on Amazon, I'll do an announcement here. I especially think that if you just want a really good overview of all the history of this alien and UFO stuff from the 40s forward, it's an excellent book for that. And don't be afraid of the fact that it's from a Catholic perspective, because I didn't get that like sort of there's no preachiness in this, or, you know, she's not ramming Christianity or Catholicism down your throat. She's talking about the intersection and the connections. And I'm told at the end of the book, which I haven't gotten to yet, but I will, there's a lot of talk of what the Catholic Church has said and done about aliens and UFOs and the official perspective into those things. A lot of people don't know, but the Catholic Church is very interested in aliens and UFOs, I believe. They have their own observatory, which is looking for exoplanets and intelligent life out there. That's extremely interesting to me. So that's all I got for you, friends. I'll be back tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. No place I'd rather be than right here with you. And I hope you'll be here with me tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be here, and I hope you will too. So that's all I got for you. Until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.